So Ravi needs no introduction. He's already found someone he's crossed paths with back in 2019, and I'm sure many of you have had the opportunity to hear him speak or interacted with him in his corporate avatar, which was followed very quickly by his philanthropy and non-profit avatar. Will not list the sheer long list of institutions he has helped to build, has led, has coached and mentored. What I will make a very quick comment on is that in addition to all of this, Ravi has inspired a lot of people by leading by example. Uh, in recent years, particularly with authoring books, doing podcasts, he's very sharply distilled out key learnings from his own lived experiences and shared it with the world. And I can say I myself benefited a lot from your construct of a portfolio life once I stepped out from my full-time role with the last nonprofit that I worked for. And the joy it has given me has been immense, and I owe you gratitude for that, Ravi. In today's conversation, I think that's what we'd like to get out in terms of for a group of seniors, people who have led very full lives, successful first careers, now looking to do things differently or trying to do different things. How can they learn from your experience? Yeah. With that, Ravi would open it up for your opening remarks and then, facilitate this conversation even as we invite people to put their questions into the chat box. And we'll keep this very, very conversational.
Sure, Sudha. First of all, thank you for inviting me onto your series and for this nice introduction. I have zero prepared remarks. So I came entirely to have a conversation first with you and then with the audience. So yeah, I'm just going to return serve and ask you to lead.
Sure. Then let's start at the beginning, which is somewhere in your 30s, perhaps, as you were leading very prominent organizations, first Cummins, then Microsoft, very soon stepped up to board roles at Bank of Baroda, Infosys. Before you came into SVP and Rockefeller and everything else that followed, give us a glimpse into what your thoughts were about success in the corporate world, and then suddenly switch to less mainstream roles in building ecosystems for philanthropy and nonprofits.
Sure. So I think the first part of my career till probably about 40 was fairly common in the sense you grow up in a home where succeeding in academics is valued more highly than almost anything else. And to please your mom in particular, but parents and family, and not let them down, not disappoint, you just strive and excel and go to good colleges and do well and try and get a good job. I was very lucky that my first job was with a company called, then called Cummins Engine Company, now called Cummins. And I spent about 16 years there, first in the US, and then I came back to India in 96. I was about 33. And it was to essentially shut down a failing joint venture with Tata Motors. And I was very driven, very hardworking, and quite courageous, and ignored the instructions to shut it down, and we made it a great success. And my ambition in those days was only to excel at everything I took on, every challenge I took on, and eventually be the CEO. So it was nothing very different from what lots and lots of people aspire to, and perhaps I was different only because I was luckier than many. And I think the real turning point came when I was 40. When you turn 40, many people have this moment of anxiety because suddenly you begin to realize you're not going to be young forever. Time is passing you by, and you better do something important and consequential. at least in your mind, everybody else seems to be doing well, but you, and you're getting left behind. All those kind of fears and anxieties. And luckily for me at that time, Microsoft was looking for a person to help build the business in India. I knew nothing about IT, but it seemed like a great, interesting company and a great job. So I was honest enough to tell even Bill Gates, who interviewed me. Those days, he used to interview everybody, saying, "Look, Bill, I don't even do my email. My secretary prints the email and gives it to me, and I write it up, and next day he types it up. So the only reason I'm here is the headhunter said you won't get to meet Bill Gates ever. So I said it was worth it. Anyway, for whatever reason, the company thought it was worth taking a bet on me, and I decided it was a risk worth taking, and ended up spending a good 8 years there building the business to recognizably what it is today. The next big change came. I was 47, and it was 2010, and I was only clear that I didn't want to be an employee anymore. I was tired of answering to someone else, being held accountable. I wanted to, and I didn't want to postpone living. That was actually just about the time CK Prahlad died. I was very, very, very close to CK, and I was very fond of him, and he was very fond of me. And his death shook me up. It was April 2009. And I realized, look, you shouldn't postpone doing the things that matter. Okay, there's no guarantee that you're going to live to 60, retire, then do the things you want. So I said, look, I don't know what I, what want to do next, but let me go out without a plan once in my life, take a serious risk and see what's out there. And so from 2011 till today, what I've tried to do is remain curious, and try many things. And some of them have grown into interesting and consequential things. And so that's about it. As Steve Jobs said, you can connect the dots looking backwards. So if you had asked me in 2010 or 2018 or even 2021, saying, is this what you thought you'd be doing in 24? No, there was no way of predicting it. So yeah, I hope that
Yeah.
answers a bit.
Yeah. Our audience perhaps already knows this, but just to kind of call this out, a lot of things you did have been very legacy building in the sense you were one of the pioneers for social venture partners in India. Today, it is there in most large cities as a network of philanthropy-minded, high net worth individuals who regularly contribute, right? And in that process have brought to life many nonprofits. You worked with the United Nations on Yuva and other ventures. You're on the board of Rockefeller Foundation. Uh, so while you have direct projects, which are your babies like GAME, like the Global Alliance for Planet and People, which perhaps take a lot of your daytime calories, you also have other interests that you set into motion, and then others join that journey, and kind of it leads a life of its own. And somewhere in this, there's this whole construct of a portfolio life, right?
Yeah.
Deep involvement in some, broad involvement in many, uh, and leaving your fingerprints in a lot of places. So talk to us a little bit about how you came upon this design for your life, and how do you benefit from this?
Sure. You've said two things actually. One is the direct question of how do you design your portfolio and so forth. But there was also implicitly there a point around leaving a legacy. And I, in my case, I didn't, it's not an accident. I go into everything hoping to leave behind something that'll, outlast me. And, whether it was building the Cummins business in India or Microsoft in India as an employee or starting SVP, etc., I really try very hard to build something that's going to endure and become better. And yeah, so that's an intentional thing, and I would bring that, underscore that for the audience. Now, in terms of the portfolio life, what's the idea of a portfolio life? The point is that, look, in In life, you want many things, multiple things. You want to make some money and make sure that you don't run out of it. You want to have impact. You want learning. You want to have fun. And when you're in the mainstream part of your career, you look for all those things in one place, which is where you work. As you get older, I think it becomes important, sometimes even necessary, to disaggregate those things. So you do something that brings money, you do something else for fun, you do something else that brings you purpose. And so each of those things, gives you something that you value, and then collectively it becomes your portfolio. So there's quite a lot written about portfolio life. So those of you who are interested can certainly go online and read about it. One or two books. I've written a whole chapter in my last book on how you go about building a portfolio life. The thing I would say is it's hard to do intellectually. So when you're starting out, all you have to do is have the courage to try your hand at many things. And some things will work out, other things won't. You think something is going to give you, joy, and then when you actually try it, it may not. You pound on some doors and they remain locked, and other doors seem to be open with a welcome mat for you. And so you should be bold and walk through. So when I started out in 2011, the startup fever was there in Bangalore even at that time. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do a startup. And it was going to be around something in IT. And I went to Mr. Narayan Murthy and he said he would, sure, I'll fund you. But he did ask me, look, are you sure you want to do it? And next morning, that night, I thought about it and I said, I realized the only reason I'm doing it is because so many others are doing it and I was feeling left out. And I was glad he asked that question because next morning I said, you're right, sir. That's not what I want to do. On the other hand, opportunities came along, which I hadn't anticipated, and I said yes to. So, for instance, there's somebody here from UNICEF who retired from UNICEF. In 2018, I had written to the CEO of UNICEF in New York, and I said, I'd like to come here and pitch my idea for youth entrepreneurship. And she said, come on in. And then I, gave a talk to the leadership team. They liked it. And then they said, look, we're not going to fund you, but guess what? You can join us and we'll give you our platform to do this work. And then I spent 5 years helping build what is today called Generation Unlimited. In India, it's called Yuva. So my point, so there's things you can anticipate, and the other times when opportunities just come sailing by, and you should be at least awake enough to recognize opportunity and not be held back by fear and grab it. And so essentially what happens is through this process of experimentation, you discover 3, 4, 5 things that, collectively give you all the things you want. It's like a meal. You have carbohydrates and proteins and vitamins and other such things. And so you have a complete balanced meal across that. And so your job is to assemble this portfolio.
Right.
And also the portfolio is not static. So your portfolio today is different from portfolio 3 years from now. It's constantly shifting as the world changes and your life and interests also evolve.
Yeah. Now, where there is a big transition involved in your mainstay, there is a chasm of self-belief to be crossed, right? It's not very easy, for instance, to go from being a full-time CEO of a large corporate, for instance, and this I speak on behalf of a lot of our audience here today, to going into a completely different sector, not being a subject matter expert, not having a vision to share on day one, perhaps having to first be a silent observer, just learn, and then figure out over time how best you can contribute, playing to the strengths that you have accrued through your first career. To such people, how would you give practical, actionable steps, right? How can you
Yeah.
get started? It's just that first
So
leap of
first thing
faith.
is, it's normal to be fearful.
Hmm.
So you shouldn't feel bad or in some ways sort of
Yes.
incompetent or smaller. All of us are fearful when you start on a new adventure and step off from the known and the familiar into the unknown. And so I was also very fearful. What are you fearful of? You're fearful, first of all, of identity. Okay, you had an identity with whatever it is you were doing and now leaving behind. And so I've written a lot about this. So today, tomorrow, somebody says, "Oh, Sudha, um, what do you do?" And you can't have a neat, simple answer like I work for so and so, or you know, no, it's more complicated. So you have to solve for identity. Another one is money. Um, it's not just do you have enough. There's always the fear that you'll run out of it. So there's this, no matter how much you have, there's this anxieties that's normal about, continuing to earn something. A third one is there's a desire that there's a fear that you will look foolish, okay, because you were an expert at something. And then as you step away from that, you're a beginner. And you've got to be comfortable saying, look, I don't know anything. I'm a student, I'm learning. And well, most people don't mind that. But, as Satya Nadella said, it's important to move from being a know-it-all to a learn-it-all. So that's a shift you have to make. And then finally, you're afraid of failure, and failure is possible. Okay. So for all these reasons, it is fine to be fearful, but the important thing is to overcome your fears and still, move forward. In that process, it helps a lot to have a supportive spouse and family. It
Yes.
helps a lot to have a couple of friends who are saying, "Good, go for it, so that we're with you," and to have a mentor or two, or some people who will say, "Look, this seems like the right thing. Get on with it." So if you have people around you who are encouraging you, it's that much easier. I was lucky. But if you don't, it feels even more terrifying and lonely as you go down that. So I'd say surround yourself with people who are going to encourage you and reinforce you rather than pull you down.
Yeah. That's very good advice to actively co-opt your support system into the risks
Yeah,
that you're taking
yeah.
so that it's not a lonely journey. Yeah.
It's very, very, very important. And these traditional families are not helpful. Just because they will say, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? Why can't you be like everybody else?" Okay. And so if you're in that situation, you have to look for your support system elsewhere.
I see that the questions have started coming. Thanks, Rishabh, for the first question.
What's
But
he
before we
saying?
jump into that, because we are on the thought, I'll very quickly ask a question on your learning comment, because you've spoken a lot about learning agility and adaptability. And in one of your recent talks, you talked about uh, orchestrating crucible experiences or safe spaces in which you can learn so that you don't have to learn from the school of hard knocks, which is life. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. So look, the fundamental thing that everybody has to understand is that this is going to be a century of extreme change, just extreme change. And every one of us is going to be subject to great shocks. And the shocks can come from a pandemic, which sweeps up everybody. You can get a shock when the company that you're working for, which is this iconic company, and you were doing a great job, you had a great review last year, suddenly lays you off. Anything can happen and will happen. And what we have to do is prepare ourselves by becoming far more resilient, far more adaptable. Okay. So learning agility is not just your ability to, intellectually learn something new. It's not about going to edX or some online thing, taking a course and doing well. Okay. And it is very much about saying, when I'm put into a situation which I've never experienced before, how quickly am I able to comprehend what's going on, adapt to it, and then actually flourish. And so, if you're going to develop this mindset and set of skills, the only way to do it is like you go develop any physical muscle. You go to a gym and work out. So, the analogy here is you have to take on new challenges which are outside your comfort zone. And in the beginning, it'll be difficult. But then, as you make a success of it, you grow in self confidence and this muscle. And then the next time you take on another different challenge, it's so much easier. And so rather than waiting for life to kick you in the butt and put you into these situations, if you actually consciously go out and take on some of these big challenges and struggle hard to make it a success, I think you build the mindset, capabilities, the self-confidence, and all these things.
And a lot of us that succeeded because we learned better or had more information or thrived on knowledge are now also finding out that these are no longer differentiators. Right? So this is very, very timely from that standpoint. In an age of information, to build resilience, to have wider exposure is very critical. Right?
Yeah. So you see youngsters having, vastly more relevant knowledge or skills.
Or just access to it through a GPT.
Yeah, a child with a cell phone and access to the internet and GPT is every bit as smart as, or no way disadvantaged. And so you have to figure out, how am I going to stay relevant in this game?
Right.
So
yes, so with that, let's jump in.
What did Rishabh ask? You said Rishabh would ask.
Sushma, I'm struggling with my screen here. If you can take over.
Sure. I don't see a question from Rishabh
Okay.
on the chat. Rishabh, do you have a question? If not, we'll come back to you. We have a question from Aditya Iyengar.
Hey,
Let me read it out.
Can you hear me?
Hold on one second, Rishabh. Let me just finish with the... Oh, go ahead. Go ahead with your question.
No worries. You couldn't see the question because I posted directly to Sudha. Hi, Ravi. Thank you for hosting this. So I think my question, Ravi, while a lot of second careers are mostly seen, kind of a post-50 scenario, but when you spoke about, almost like 40s as a time frame when you started to think about it. What have you been noticing about, this trend of, I don't want to wait till 50s rather than starting almost at 35 and 38, and what is the advice that you would give?
Good. Thank you for asking that question. I was hoping somebody would ask it. Look, I've said this about 1,000 times, that forget about jobs leading to stable careers. That's an obsolete artifact of the last century. The riskiest thing today is a job. It's way riskier than being an entrepreneur. Okay, as an entrepreneur, you're somewhat in control of your decisions and life. And yes, there are risks with it. But in a job, there's so many more variables, including what can happen to the company, what your manager thinks of you, and so on and so forth. So my advice to everybody is don't wait till you're 50 and all that. As soon as possible, get going on the path towards being either self-employed, or better yet, if you can have any interest in starting a business, start a business. Everybody needs a job out of college to get started, because that's where you learn your first practical skills. That's where you get socialized. You learn to live in an organization, to be disciplined, to be accountable, all those things. So a job is very necessary as a launch pad, but as soon as possible, certainly no later than 40, you need to be thinking hard about how you can be on your own, because sooner rather than later, this is going to be the requirement of most of us. Sure, there'll always be a few people who end up like, spending their whole life with a single company and retiring as a CEO. But those are going to be complete minority aberrations. Okay, the default, and it's no longer about second careers. Even though that's the title of the behind Sudha, that's what it says. It's actually about many careers. And the reason is because while this fluidity is happening, people are also living longer. You know, a lot of people are now living into their 90s, which means you're going to be want to be engaged, productive, contributing, or even earning till you're 75, 80. So these two forces are very much in collision. And so unless you learn, as Sudha and her colleagues are trying to do, to start branching out and learning to stand on your own feet, it's going to be a problem.
Wonderful. So when we started second careers and we set the age limit as 50, there were quite a few people who reached out to us saying, hey, can you just make this 40 and above?
Yeah.
And let me tell you, we are seriously rethinking that, and hopefully in 2025 we must.
You must. This game of musical chairs accelerates right after 40. So
Yep.
I think there'll be many takers, and your audience will be much wider.
Got it. So Saugata, thank you. Saugata has been very complimentary. He reads your columns, and hearing you speak and write from your heart, sort of gives him a Saugata, I presume it's a man, I'm not sure.
Absolutely.
Addresses all the concerns. So thank you, Ravi. Question from Aditya Iyengar. Aditya, if you can turn on your video. What do you do in your career if everything is going against you? And particularly, the top management is showing discomfort.
Showing discomfort. Oh, well. Well, look, if you're in an unfavorable or hostile environment, okay, where you are not being nourished, your ideas are not getting any traction, then definitely you need to make a move. And the move may not be, it could be within the same organization to a, better environment, or it could be outside. To continue to be out there and feel stifled and exploited and like a victim is a great disservice to you. So however uncomfortable it is, you need to get going.
That's true. I'm looking for a change also for analytical business analytics.
Yeah. So again, looking for a change, make sure it's an active process, not a passive process. Okay. So if you're waiting for change to drop into your lap and you're just sitting there praying, that may not be very helpful. You'll have to go out and make efforts to create opportunities. Okay.
Great.
So,
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Folks, we have a ton of questions. So I'm going to control the interaction here a little bit. So if we have time towards the end,
you may want to couple 2, 3 at a time. So
exactly, Ravi. Exactly. There is one very interesting question from Deepta Dipayan Paul. Your book, Conquering Chaos, offers insights into navigating uncertainty and complexity. What inspired you to write the book? And if I may ask, what would you consider the most surprising lesson that you've learned from managing your own uncertainties and complexities that you would like to share with future leaders?
Yeah, well, the book Conquering the Chaos is a very different one. It was a business book aimed at global companies that were coming to India or contemplating coming to India and was struggling. Reality is, as my mentor Ashok Ganguly said, India is a land of mouth-watering opportunities and eye-watering challenges. It's a very, very, very difficult place to do business. And so, only a handful of companies have managed to really make India significantly important for them, like a Suzuki or a Unilever or whatever. And so that book was more about lessons. And the most important thing I sort of concluded and the advice I gave is, sure, the market's difficult, but the biggest obstacle to your success here is your own headquarters mindset. And that's what you have to change. But in terms of handling uncertainty and ambiguity and all those things, Look, the thing I've learned, not entirely fully, but significantly, is that fears, we all have fears because we are human, but the fears are mostly in the mind. And if you have, develop enough courage to confront your fears, they often melt away. Okay, so it's important to not be held back by your fears and all this uncertainty, and take some risks, because there's no such thing as zero risk. Not taking a risk sometimes is the biggest risk. Okay, staying put in your current job, whoever the previous person was asked, might be the biggest risk for you.
Great. So I'm going to couple two questions. One from Rajeshwari Chandrasekhar and the other from Harmeet Sehgal. Both of their questions are about the inherent challenges when you are venturing into a new area, and how do you cope with those challenges. Harmeet has a little bit of a nuance to it in terms of how do you do this, particularly in the social sector.
Yeah, again, I would highly encourage people, those of you who are interested in more details, to read my book, because I did write it like a practical manual. But the point is, life is going to become more and more uncertain, more and more bumpy for all of us. Okay. And so you have to do a set of things to equip yourself for a bumpy ride. If you're flying and you encounter severe turbulence, captain says, fasten your seatbelt. Right. So what is the equivalent out here? Well, one of the things is, I think you need to dump negative influences in your life and surround yourself with people who are going to be positive, reinforce you, people who you can learn from. I think that's really, really, really important. I think it's quite important that you should cultivate skills which are relevant, and they're going to be relevant 20 years from now, not just next year. And I talk about 4 of those skills again in my book, Sushma. I talk about leadership, right? So if you are able to just get people to come together voluntarily to accomplish something, that's a priceless skill in this century. And it's not something you're born with, it's something you develop, and everybody can develop it. Similarly, social skills are becoming more and more and more important. So you need these 3 or 4 skills that are going to be even more important as the world goes into more automation, more AI, etc. I think you need to have a very healthy attitude towards money. And a lot of people, particularly successful people who of the sort who might be on this call, we start out with not a particularly helpful approach towards money. Okay, either it becomes an objective, or else you have a scarcity mindset around it. And whatever the case, you have to work hard on yourself to overcome that, and so on and so forth. So anyway, it's a great question. It deserves a wider answer than I think we have time for.
Here's a very interesting one from Deepesh Goel. How do you look at the role of a mentor in your career? You mentioned that you took the advice of Mr. Narayan Murthy to not do a startup. What do you think you missed in your own ability to judge your abilities at that point in time? Deepesh, I hope I've paraphrased your question right.
What I'd say is this. First of all, I don't think I've ever had a formal mentor in my life. A mentor is, sort of like Ekalavya, anybody you respect and admire. And sometimes you know the person and you have a relationship with him or her. Sometimes you are learning from them at a distance. Okay. but the important thing is to have a few such role models in your life, and at least a few of whom you know. In my book, I talk about the importance for every one of us to develop what I call a personal board of advisors. Okay, who are 5, 6 people who you really trust, who you can consult before you make any important decision. And you really need that. So, for instance, when I, in 2003, had the opportunity to leave a great company where I was doing well to join Microsoft, I consulted a bunch of people, and almost everyone, 10 out of 10, said, don't do it. But I ignored them. Okay, so it's not like you have to listen to them, but they're giving you perspectives, and you use those to navigate your own decision. So around that startup decision, yeah, maybe it was a mistake or not. I don't regret it. I've done many startups since then, but they're all in the social sector. They were not traditional enterprises. You know, GAME is a startup, the Global Energy Alliance is a startup, SVP was a startup. So I've done many startups. I just think it was right at that moment for me not to do that one because my motivations were all the wrong ones. Okay. And I was able to see that.
No, Ravi, this resonates a lot with me, particularly because a lot of time in my career, people have told me, so when I became a chief strategy officer, some very leading people in the industry told me how that would be a career limiting move. And far from the contrary, it allowed me to explore who I am. So, so for all the listeners here, right? I think what I am taking from what Ravi is saying is, unless you explore yourself and venture, right? There is a part of it that you will never know.
Yeah.
And there's a part of yourself you will never know.
Yeah.
So here's a question from Shalini Upadhyay. Hi, Ravi. While I understand compensation may not be the prime decision-making criterion for a post-50 career, I want to pick your brains on how you perceive working pro bono to get started before going full throttle. There's a viewpoint that one doesn't take you seriously when you're doing pro bono. This question, Shalini, resonated very much with me because I live in this world. So over to you, Ravi.
No, look, the issue of money is very complicated because people have very different circumstances. Okay. So if you're 45 years old and you still have a family to support and kids to educate, and you don't have a nest egg or whatever, your financial situation is very different than, somebody who's 60 and everybody is grown up and you've got some reasonable savings and so forth. So your circumstances are very different. Also, your needs are very different. So I can't give a one sort of simple bit of advice here. What I can say for myself is I decided on a number. Okay, here's the number I need per month. You can argue whether that's the right number or not, but I suggest every one of you should have that number, saying I need 50,000 rupees a month or whatever, it could be a larger amount, and I'm going to earn that. But the key is to figure out how to earn that number, working the fewest hours possible. So I meet my number by working for profit 1 day a month. That gives me 29 days to do all the other things, and most of which I do pro bono. Okay. So that formula has worked reasonably well for me. It may not work for everyone. There's also a sense that anything given free is often not respected, taken for granted. Well, that depends on the situation. If that's the kind of organization, then you should charge for it. Okay. But much of my work is helping people who don't have great resources. So working pro bono, and they greatly appreciate whatever little help I'm able to give. So working pro bono seems like the right thing. I also do pro bono work for some fat companies, okay? But I don't want to take their money because it causes me to lose my independence, or the world will look at me differently. So I ask them to donate directly to one of my charities, okay? So I have multiple models at work. You have to evolve your model.
Excellent. Shanti, I know you have a question. Give me a second before I come to you.
Now, again,
Ravi.
there's a chap called Ravi at 536 who's asking this question, which is standing in front of my chat. He's talking about people who are 55 plus, options are very limited as an employee, MBA. I think this mindset has to be killed. There is going to be no job for you. And the more time you waste seeking it, the more frustrated you're going to get, the more time you're going to waste. The faster you start experimenting and figuring out what are you good at, how you can add value that people will pay you something for, the better off you're going to be. Okay. I think above 40, you're living on borrowed time. Above 55, expiry date is over. As an employee, not in terms of value to the world.
Shanti, you have a question? Please go ahead.
And I'm going back, Ravi, to the comments you made about the skills we need. You spoke about adaptability, resilience, social skills, leadership. As you, rewind the clock and look at what skills you've developed and how you went through developing some of these skills, what are some lessons? What are some tips you would like to share with us? Because edX doesn't give you these skills, right?
Look, that's a great question, Shanti. There are technical skills and there are adaptive skills. Okay. Technical skill might be coding. Okay. Or I don't know what else is relevant today, but those are the kinds of useful practical skills. Fine. For that, you can take a class, you can take a course, you can whatever, do that. The adaptive skills are life skills. Those cannot be learned in a classroom. They cannot be learned online. They cannot be learned any other way other than experientially. And even experientially, the only way to learn it is by these, what Sudha and I were talking about, the school of tough challenges, crucible experiences. So, I think I learned the skills that have been invaluable to me by, from time to time, taking on a very big challenge, which I was at the moment very scared of. Right? So 1996, I decided to come back to India and to lead a job that was much bigger than me, which was where it was a failing company and the job was to shut it down. And I'd never managed anything as big before. I'd never managed anything in India. And yeah, so I took that on, and that was transformational. Okay, shifting industries from diesel engines to software without knowing anything about software was another crucible experience. Okay, so what you have to do, each of us, is figure out what's the next big challenge that I must take on. And in the process, you develop these adaptive skills. And then you do it again and again. So that's what I would say. So technical skills, different cup of tea. I think most people know how to acquire those reasonably, classroom, etc., etc. I'm talking about these adaptive life skills.
Thank you so much, Ravi. And I think for our audience, which is a lot of them are over 50, I think the risks are far fewer in just taking that leap of faith and trying something new. Because you can only get...
Yeah, but it's not just an age thing. As I keep saying, life is not risk-free. So the risk of doing something compared to the risk of sitting around hoping things will work out fine for you, I'd rather go out there doing something. Okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
Sudha, how are we doing on time?
We have 15 minutes.
15 minutes, okay. Ravi, this is an interesting one. It's a question from Ashok. In your diverse career, have you encountered an ethical dilemma? And how did you tackle it?
Look, you do anything and you're bound to come, face to face with some ethical dilemma. And some of them are really easy and they're not really dilemmas. It's plain black and white, right or wrong. The grays are the more complicated. For instance, you're sitting on a board and there's something that's really not right in the company and everybody's ignoring it. Okay? What's your fiduciary duty as a board member? Okay, it's quite gray. And you have to figure that out. And most notably, I had that dilemma when I was on the board of Infosys. And then you do your duty. There are going to be some people who are excited and happy, and some people will say you didn't do the right thing. You don't do your duty, people will again criticize. So in these situations, you can't aim to please. You have to have your own moral compass about what is right and get on with it. Okay. It's a great question, but life is full of ethical dilemmas.
If I may just add,
yeah, please.
In such circumstances, just be true to yourself and ask yourself that if you are somebody who raises a voice against it, you may lose that position. And do you still want to do it? I have been in such similar situations, and I'm sure Ravi has been as well. So at the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Ravi?
And this is where having that personal board really helps. Because if it's a really big decision and you're trying to figure out what is my dharma here, okay, having those wise people who are sharing a perspective can clarify your mind. In my case, I always do that, always.
Yeah.
Was it Sudha who was going to say something? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. No.
No, I was on mute. But I do want, before we get into people that have raised their hands, a comment like past 55 year, past your expiry date has to have a follow-up question.
As an employee, I said, not
as an employee, yes.
Yeah.
And Abhijit has asked a follow-up question to that on how can you establish, actually it is as an employee, right? He's asking about how can you still stand out when your CV goes before you to the evaluator and age is the first thing you see. For second careers, that is our founding motivation, right? There is rampant ageism in employment, and hence it was necessary to build a platform that offers all formats of being valuable as a fractional resource, as an advisor, as a mentor, as even a volunteer, and definitely as a full-time resource in sectors that are starved for human capital, like the social sector. But Ravi, do add your comments there because this is important for people to walk away with the right mindset about this topic.
I'm still puzzled by the question, honestly. I keep saying the same thing over and over again. I don't care what your age is. You need to quickly learn to stand up on your own feet, be independent. The company needs to need you more than you need the company. If you can establish that asymmetry, you're going to be good. Okay. So what does that mean? You need to be exceptional at something. There is no room for mediocrity anymore. Okay. AI is better than average people at many things and soon at most things. Okay. So there's no room for an average developer. There's no room for an average writer. There's no room for an average musician. Anything. Okay. You better be really good. Okay. So that's one thing I would definitely say. Number two, even if you're in a so-called employment situation, you have no idea how fragile that relationship is. Okay. Even in good companies. And it's not because they're bad. Their circumstances change. Look at Boeing. one of the greatest companies. Look at Intel, one of the greatest companies. Suddenly 10,000 people have to be, eliminated. Roles have to be eliminated. You could be a good performer. Nobody's going to care. And so you have to have the framing that I'm here only doing a project. Okay, this project mindset's important. When I joined Microsoft, everybody said, don't do it. You'll get fired soon. It's a tough company, etc. And I said, look, I'm not going to aim to retire here. Okay, I'm going to see it as a project. In my case, the project it was actually multiple projects. They lasted 8 years. Okay, so you need to have this mindset where what is important and valuable is you. Okay, and you need to constantly find a way to stay relevant to the world. Okay, this framing of you employee-employer thing has to undergo a massive revolutionary change. It's over for most people, not all people.
So at the end of the session, we will flash the different opportunities on second careers.
Sorry?
No, at the end of the session, we will share some of the wonderful opportunities that are already.
That's why I agreed to be on your program, is because I love what you're trying to do, which is to create a marketplace that matches people and opportunities. And I think we need many more of these marketplaces.
So here's a question from Switzerland, from Olga Speckard. Thank you for your question, Olga. Olga has been running, is part of a foundation called Syngenta. And her question is, should you feel that the industry you dedicated more than a decade of your time to is not moving forward as planned? And should you put a hold, step back, observe, or continue to keep building capacity?
Okay.
Olga, I don't know if I captured your question correctly, but let's have Ravi respond and then feel free to interact.
Okay. So Olga, I know your company quite well. Simon Winter is a good friend. I think the thing about the 21st century is no industry is going to move forward as planned. So take that as a given, that neither your industry nor your organization or company is going to be able to move forward in any predictable fashion. And our sort of challenge as individuals is to figure out how to constantly adapt. So if it's moving on a trajectory that you don't like or are uncomfortable with, you need to figure out, how you pivot. That's it. Okay. And just because you spend 10 years doesn't mean anything, right? I spent 16 years becoming a world expert on diesel engines. Then I became pretty good at understanding software and services. Then I became very good at something else. Today I'm a student of energy transition and renewable energy and learning fast. Yeah, that's what matters. Your ability to make a shift, start at the bottom, learn quickly, add value. That's the game we have to master.
So we'll be able to take a couple of more questions. There are 2 raised hands. I see your need to interact directly. My only suggestion is please keep it very succinct. So Sushil, please ask your question.
Thanks, Sushma. Hi, Ravi sir. Currently, I am working in IT, 39-year-old. As I mentioned, long-term plan is to move as a certified financial planner. But every week I read something new. I think that is the option to explore as a second career. So I think I am stuck in analysis paralysis mode. So how can I move myself forward and explore new things?
Very good. Please read my book. Okay. But what I would say in the book is, you cannot solve that answer in your mind sitting in your room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you're thinking about 3, 4, 5 different options, start low-cost experiments without quitting your job necessarily. So if you like certified financial planning, go get certified. Okay. Whether you become a planner or not, you'll learn something, you'll have a certification. If you want, I saw that you want to become some patent agent. Go start exploring that. And what you'll see as you explore it is, I'm not really all that excited about this. Or you're excited, but the universe is not. Something. And then the path will unfold. The worst thing is to just be sitting there doing analysis paralysis. Okay. Kinetic, and you're an engineer. Kinetic energy is better than potential energy. Okay. Keep moving.
So 5 lucky attendees of today will get a copy of Ravi's book signed by him. But for that, you have to be registered on secondcareers.com as a professional. Unfortunately, the site is now open only for 50-year-olds. But Ravi, I guess Monapa has also shared the link to the book, What the Heck Do I Do With My Life? Do make use of that. Yes.
So I think we are Murali Ramabatla.
Yeah.
Hi, Murali.
Hi, Raviji, namaskaram. I've been following you on LinkedIn. I've been connected with you for years. I've always believed in what you said, which is keep trying many things before you arrive at some. That's fine. Today, you kind of preempted my question while you were answering Olga of learning new things, mastering them, like diesel engines to software services, and so on. Yes, that's the mantra, Ravi, I agree. But can you give us the mantra, or can you share with us the mantra as to what should be the motivation to learn new things at 50, 45, 60, and things like that? Because people feel as they grow, we're all human beings, we feel we have learned too much. Nobody believes in being a continuous learner. So what is that mantra that can make all of us believe that we have to learn till we die? We have to keep learning till we die.
Curiosity. So you look at a child. Did you have a child?
Yep, 2 children.
2 children. So when they were little, before you beat it out of them, they were infinitely curious about everything. So, to be alive is to be curious. Somewhere, some of us lose that curiosity, but it's not gone, it's still there. So you should rediscover curiosity and follow your curiosity, and it'll lead you somewhere and you learn about it, and it'll lead you somewhere else, you learn about that. So I think if you remain alive and you remain curious, you're going to be, fine. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
I think that this being childlike is, I think, very important. Okay. Having a beginner's mind is very important. And a beginner's mind is the willingness to admit you don't know anything, and the humility and effort to learn. So yeah, I'm 62 and I'm still very much a student, very much a student. Okay.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
Last question from Funny Madhav Prabhakar, and then over to you, Sudha, to bring it in.
So good evening, sir.
Hi.
It has been it has been a very insightful session, sir. Sir, my background, I've been in oil and gas industry for almost about 2 decades. Prior to that, I was in Xerox and all. Now I am trying to move into the social enterprise, which is part of my life's fulfillment exercise.
Wonderful.
But there is a small amount of fear that whether I will be able to get into it or not get it. How to overcome that fear, sir?
So first thing is you should register on Second Careers.
That I have done.
And Sudha and Sushma and all are going to be there to help you find something that you like.
Yes, sir.
The second thing I keep telling everybody, I'm telling you, fear is natural. Okay. But courage is the ability to operate despite your fears. So keep going. I'm also afraid of many things. Okay. But if you keep going, you'll find that most of the fear is only in your mind. It is not real.
Correct.
Okay.
True, sir.
So it's like that. So just have the courage to go down that path. And if you do it with purity, I think you will get to a good place sooner or later. It may not be in next year.
Yes, sir.
But if you, like me, look, I take on so many things. And when I joined Microsoft, till my 4th year, the newspapers were saying this guy is going to fail. Okay. But you don't give up. You keep going. And by the 8th year, you're the hero.
Yeah,
so
correct.
So you just have to keep going despite what your mind is telling you and all that, and surround yourself with positive people, Funny.
Okay? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, the satsang is very important. Okay?
Yes.
People, if you're with like-minded people, you'll encourage and support each other. If you go alone, you'll
isolated.
You'll feel isolated and you can give up.
So kind of you, sir. It's wonderful, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Good.
Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Sudha.
Yeah, so courage and humility, says Sudha on the comment, and that's so true, because I'm reminded of the time when I was 3 weeks old in the social sector, in a large room, and someone was making a presentation which had the term SDG, and without pausing to think, I asked, what is SDG? Now, people in the social sector would recoil because the Sustainable Development Goals have been the rallying cry for pretty much every social enterprise. And this was a room full of very, very admired people. But me, fresh off the boat, with very little general knowledge, might I add, asked a question, and the person very gently, very respectfully responded to it. Right? And also gave me the air cover by saying, for someone from a technology background walking into the social sector, these are the resources you should pursue and get to a point where you feel comfortable about not just asking the questions, but also helping find the answers to these very difficult questions faced by humanity. Checking your ego at the door, I think, opens up the universe to conspire almost to work in your favor. I think the transitions become easy. It gets much easier as you go along. But the first step, which is the most difficult, is something you absolutely have to take. Ravi, thank you so much for giving the safe space to ask questions, probe your theories, your very patient responses, and very insightful responses. I think I promised to the group on one of our community forums that with Ravi, there will never be a dull moment. And you would not be shy of, pushing our thinking in terms of even just challenging the fundamentals. And thank you for doing that, very consistent to how you've been all through, authentic and candid. Loved the conversation. Thanks for making time for us. For the rest of the audience, I would also ask you to stay on because I have some quick updates.
Since this is an audience that is on the slightly older side, yes. I want to leave you all with a thought. I get up every day firmly believing that everything that I've done before, everything I've learned before is only preparation for what I'm going to do now. Yes. Okay, that the most important thing that I'm going to do is ahead of me, not behind me. Now, this may or may not be true, but you have to believe it. You have to convince yourself of it. Okay, so whether you're 40 or 50 or 60 or 80, it doesn't matter. You have to have this mindset that whatever you have done before is only prep for what is to come next. Okay, so go with that feeling and convince yourself of that, and I think you're going to be great.
Your best is always yet to come.
Yes, your best is yet to come, both in terms of your best self as well as your most impactful work.
And with that, thank you so much. Loved the conversation. The video will be made available on secondcareers.com community page as always. And registered professionals will be able to access it at will.
Can you scrape all the questions and send it to me? There's some very interesting questions which I didn't get to.
Yes.
So if you can just copy that.
Absolutely. We'll do that.
Bye, everyone. Good luck.